Hello everybody and welcome back to my YouTube channel and also Opera channel on LLB Society. I'm Dr. Hariri and I'm here to teach you some grammar points about adverb clauses in English. So just in order to have more information, you can visit my website at lelp.net. The domain is so easy. Let me zoom in. lelp.net. Okay, so I'm going to give you all the necessary information in a curt and brief way about adverb clauses in English in order to, for example, if you're an intermediate English learner, you can just step into the domain of upper intermediate or even advanced learner if you know what an adverb clause is and how to use it. So the outline of this lesson on adverb clause in English. What is an adverb clause? An adverb clause, maybe I can zoom in so that you can study the text better. An adverb clause is a dependent clause, so or a subordinate clause in English, which is the opposite of an independent clause. So let me explain it to you here. So, for example, let me give you a good example. I like Jack because he is punctual. So, in this sentence, this part, I like Jack, this is an independent clause. It means that it is actually autonomous. It is independent by itself. It doesn't need any further, let's say, sentence for it to have a complete meaning. So it is an independent clause, so or main clause. So, but because he is punctual, this is a dependent clause or actually subordinate clause, okay, or adverb clause. So this simple sentence can illustrate what an adverb clause is. So I like Jack, independent clause, because he is punctual. Dependent clause, subordinate clause. Okay, and in this sentence, because is a subordinate conjunction. Subordinate conjunction. We will explain. I will explain. I will explain it to you later on in more depth. So, which is the opposite of an independent clause. In a compound sentence, both the independent clause or main clause and adverb clause or dependent clause are closely related to each other. And you can see the flashcards. You know, there are around 1500 English flashcards on LLB Society to show a particular function. So they do have particular functions. For example, here, because shows reason. So the function is reason. So different functions of an adverb clause in English. Reason. And number one is because, which is a subordinate conjunction. We have technically three types of conjunctions in English. Conjunctions or transitions actually that are intended to link sentences or parts of sentences. For example, we have coordinating conjunctions. Coordinating conjunctions. For example, and, or, nor, so, for, yet. These are coordinating conjunctions in English. What about the other type? Correlative conjunctions. Correlative conjunctions. For example, both and, either or, neither or neither, nor, not only but also. These are correlative conjunctions. And the last type of conjunctions, subordinate conjunctions. Subordinate. Maybe I can just indent here. Subordinate. Subordinate conjunctions, for example, although, because. There is a subtle difference. I'm not going to complicate it here, so maybe I can explain about them later. So, subordinate conjunction, because, for example, I had to stay up so late last night because I had to study for the exam. So, this part, I had to stay up so late last night, is the independent clause or main clause. Okay? And because I had to study for the exam actually is the dependent clause or subordinate clause, and because it's the subordinate conjunction. Why do we call it dependent clause? Because it doesn't make sense by itself. For example, what was the meaning of this phrase, because I had to study for the exam? Okay, it's not complete. That's why it is dependent. Okay, next subordinate conjunction to show reason is since. Subordinate conjunction. Since it was raining, I got totally wet. Since means actually because of, or because it was, since and because have the same meaning. Because it was raining, I got totally wet. So since it was raining, it's a dependent clause because it doesn't make sense by itself. So it depends on the main clause or independent clause, that is, I got totally wet. I got totally wet is independent by itself. So it is independent clause. So remember, it is up to you to put the independent clause first or dependent clause. Doesn't make sense. Here in this sentence actually for since, the dependent clause comes first, but in the previous sentence, the actually independent clause. Here, the independent clause comes first, but here, the dependent clause comes first. It's up to you. Okay. Subordinate conjunctions showing contrast. Although means it's a subordinate conjunction to show contrast. Although I was nervous, I delivered an excellent lecture in front of an audience of 100 PhD students. So, two things have happened and they are in contrast with each other. So, first of all, I was nervous. Although I was nervous. This is the dependent clause starting with the subordinate conjunction although, and it's highly recommended that you use a comma here because it shows contrast. I delivered an excellent lecture or presentation. I made a good presentation in front of. These are flashcards. I'm not going to zoom out because you can just go to my website and access those 1500 English flashcards so far. An audience of 100 PhD students. So I was about to just blow it, to actually fail at just giving that lecture, but I could just control my emotions, and it shows a contrast here. Alright, so the next subordinate conjunction to show contrast is though. Though and although have the same structure and almost have the same meaning. So, although it was chilly on top of the mountain, we had a perfectly great time with each other. So again, a contrast actually has been presented. Although or though it was chilly means so cold, increment, let's say weather, on top of the mountain, or you can say summit. peak. We had a perfectly great time with each other. Or you could say we had a perfectly great time with each other, although it was so chilly on top of the mountain. It's up to you. Whereas is another subordinate conjunction to show contrast, and the sentence reads, the teacher couldn't explain about the math problem, whereas he was a knowledgeable person. Maybe I can zoom in a little. Yes, it's better. So, okay. So, the teacher couldn't explain about the math problem, whereas, or although he was a knowledgeable person. So he knew a lot. He was knowledgeable. Okay, this is a flashcard. Whereas means but, however. So these are some flashcards. Whereas even actually here. So he couldn't explain about the math problem, although he was an expert. He was so knowledgeable. Condition. So if as a subordinate conjunction, which is so common, so typical of a subordinate conjunction to show condition. If I were a millionaire, I would buy a large house with a beautiful yard. Pay attention to this structure. This is conditional sentence type 2, which is unrealistic. It's an unreal situation. That's why we use were instead of was. And also it refers to the present time, not the past time. But because it's unreal, we just use were and simple past tense. So the tense is simple past, but the time is present. That's the difference between tense and time. Okay, if I were a millionaire, it means that I'm not a millionaire. I would buy a large house with a beautiful yard. So this is the actually dependent clause, subordinate clause, and this is the actually main clause or independent clause. Okay, as long as subordinate conjunction to show contrast. I can stay here as long as you promise to change your hostile attitude. Hostile, let me show you the flashcard if it's not possible for me to show it to you. Okay, I can stay here as long as, it means if you promise to change your hostile or aloof, unfriendly, antagonistic, aloof, unfriendly attitude or behavior. So, time. Okay, so subordinate conjunctions showing time. When? Subordinate conjunction. When I arrived home, the phone was ringing. So the first phrase or clause is a dependent or subordinate clause with the subordinate conjunction of when. The phone was ringing. Clear? While. The same meaning. We had a horrible car accident while it was raining cats and dogs. These sentences are original. You cannot find them in any other places. I have created them. And also they are copyrighted. We had a horrible or terrible car accident or car crash while it was raining cats and dogs. It's an idiom. It means raining cats and dogs means showering. Yeah, raining heavily. Okay. So we had a terrible accident, car crash, while or when it was raining cats and dogs. Purpose. So that. And you see, there is a flashcard here. So that means with the intention of, in order to. Note that this subordinate conjunction should be placed after the independent clause, because otherwise it wouldn't make sense. I was investing all the money I was earning so that I could pay off all my debts. So you cannot say so that I could pay off, because actually it doesn't make sense. It wants to show a purpose, and it cannot first actually place the purpose and then the reason for something. I was investing all the money I was earning, so I was not spending any penny of that in order to, so that means so as to, or in order to, so as to, or in order to, I could pay off all my debts. So I was in the hole to be to have so many loans or mortgages to pay off. So that I could pay off all my debts. Pay attention, B sound is not pronounced in debts. You don't say debts. Okay. Comparison. As subordinate conjunction. For example, I'm not as able to do this as she is. I'm not as able to do this as she is. Okay. Here we are comparing my ability or capability and hers. Some important tips. When you place the dependent or adverb clause first, it's better, it's not a must, it's better to use a comma to separate the two clauses. For example, the typical example that I just gave you, I like Jack because he is punctual. So here, actually, there is no comma because the independent clause actually is placed first. But maybe actually it's not a good example because this subordinate conjunction does not fit here. Let me give you a better example. The phone was ringing when I arrived home. Okay, this is much better. So here, at first we have the independent clause, therefore there is no comma. But let me just place the dependent clause first. When I arrived home, it's better to use a comma here because the dependent or subordinate clause is placed first. Okay. The phone was ringing. Okay, when I arrived home, comma, the phone was ringing. Okay. Right, so you need to be careful about the function of the subordinate conjunctions you are using. For example, for instance, the following sentence doesn't make sense, doesn't have a good meaning at all. This is because of the fact that the two clauses are related to each other, while the subordinate conjunction, although, has been used to show contrast. Pay attention. Although I was starving, I ate all the food in the pot. Doesn't make sense because actually although has been used as a subordinate conjunction to show contrast, but there is no contrast here. This part actually has the same meaning with this part. Not the same meaning, but they complete each other. But when you use although, you need to show a contrast. Although I was so hungry, starving means so hungry, I ate all the food in the pot. So it's better to replace although with because. Because I was starving, I ate all the food in the pot, in order to show a reason, not a contrast. And in order to complicate this situation just a little bit, let's focus on embedded clauses. Sometimes you can embed more than one adverb clause in a sentence. For example, you can leave the class, because if it is boring to you, then you cannot learn anything and it would be abortive. Abortive means in vain, means without any use, without any benefit. So you can leave the class. This is the one of the independent clauses, because so we have the subordinate conjunction of reason if another subordinate conjunction of condition. If it is boring to you, then you cannot learn anything. Okay, another independent clause, and actually, which is a coordinating conjunction, it would be abortive. So you see, several let's say dependent and independent clauses are embedded. All right, so let me show you something. We have another English post or lesson on LELB Society about English conjunctions. So you can have access to all of the English conjunctions, actually, with their with examples, definitions, functions, and the type of that conjunction, whether it is subordinate conjunction, coordinating conjunction, correlative conjunctions with their distinctive features and examples, functions, as I said. And so you can just simply visit my website at lelb.net and go use that search box here. Let me show it to you. Here it is, search box. And you can just search for English conjunctions. And you will definitely find some related results. English conjunctions, here it is, and you can see that. English conjunctions, adverb clauses in English, free English webinar, IELTS writing task 2. These are some actually related posts. The girl who hated books, it's a storytelling activity, and so on and so forth. These are all some posts with English conjunctions, but the first one actually is the most important one, English conjunctions. So I really recommend you visit my website at lelb.net, and if you have any question, you can leave comments and I will immediately reply to your questions. Thank you very much for your attention. Until the next time, take care and bye-bye.